World of Warfare presents the Second Battle of El Alamein. By mid-year of 1942, the struggle between Allied and Axis forces had reached a delicate standoff in North Africa after nearly 2 years of fighting between the British and Germany's Afrika Corps, supported by Italian ground troops. Fighting brutal back-and-forth campaigns across the deserts of Libya and Egypt, the pendulum of victory and defeat had changed hands repeatedly, including a British triumph under General Richard O'Connor in late 1940, followed by a decisive counteroffensive by General Erwin Rommel in 1941, earning him the moniker the Desert Fox. After the fall of Tobruk in June of 1942, the British Eighth Army retreated eastward deep into Egypt, exhausted, disheartened, and suffering from unstable leadership, exposing a dire situation that left Cairo and the Suez Canal, Britain's vital supply lifelines, within Rommel's grasp after his seemingly unstoppable advance. Halting Rommel's advance at the First Battle of El Alamein on July 1, 1942, General Claude Auchinlec's stalemate prevented the fall of Egypt for a defensive standoff at El Alamein, where Rommel built a network of minefields, barbed wire, and anti-tank gun positions known collectively as the Devil's Gardens. He then placed his Italian infantry divisions in static defensive encampments, while his German panzers were held in reserve for an anticipated counteroffensive. Taking their stand at a geographically imposed natural barrier, the British took control of a narrow bottleneck along the Egyptian coast at El Alamein, some 150 miles west of Alexandria. To the north lay the Mediterranean Sea, to the south the impassable Qattara Depression, which was a vast salt marsh that armored divisions could not cross. Britain's 40-mile stretch of front lines across the bottleneck meant that Rommel's forces had no way of flanking British positions, instead forcing Axis troops to attack head-on, creating a critical advantage for the defenders. With British morale at its lowest point during their fight in North Africa, General Claude Auchinlec was replaced by General Bernard Montgomery, who quickly restored discipline and confidence within his troops. Nicknamed Monty, the British Eighth Army's new leader refused to retreat further, declaring there will be no withdrawal from El Alamein. Known for his meticulous planning abilities, Montgomery insisted that preparation, logistical supply lines, and troop morale be in place before conducting any counteroffensive, spending the next 3 months transforming the Eighth Army into a coherent, well-fortified, and determined fighting force. Comprising a multinational force of British, Australian, New Zealand, Polish, South American, Indian, and Free French, Monty soon led a force of some 195,000 men and over 1,000 tanks, along with undisputed air supremacy provided by the Allies' Desert Air Force under Vice Marshal Arthur Conyngham. As for Rommel, his Panzer Army Africa faced increasing difficulties for his 104,000-man army, supported by 500 tanks. Supplies were stretched thin due to his 1,300-mile supply lines from Tripoli, which came under near constant attacks by British submarines and aircraft, while the Italian Navy struggled to deliver fuel and munitions across the Mediterranean. Exhausted after months of contested combat, Rommel's frustration over lack of support from Berlin and Rome led to a sharp decline in his health, eventually shipping out to convalesce in Nazi-occupied France. Thanks to his proven tactical genius on desert battlefields, even in his absence, Rommel's troops remained loyal to his leadership. Over the next 3 months, Montgomery built his Eighth Army up to maximum strength as convoys from Great Britain and America delivered new Sherman and Grant tanks to his front lines, as well as fresh troops and improved artillery. By October of 1942, Monty enjoyed a 2-to-1 superiority over the Germans in both manpower and tanks, all supported by a now dominant desert air force. Montgomery's battle plans under Operation Lightfoot aimed to penetrate the Axis defensive line north of the Qattara Depression with the goal of destroying Rommel's armored reserves before breaking out to the west. The operation's name came from the infantry's role, where they would tread lightly through Rommel's minefields in advance of Monty's tank corps, clearing mine-free lanes for his armor to follow. Next would come Operation Supercharge, under the breakout part of Montgomery's battle plan, which would draw Axis forces into the fight by driving the 8th Army's armored divisions against Rommel's panzers, wiping them out before opening the road to Libya. Montgomery's plan further relied on deception, employing dummy tanks and fake supply dumps deployed in the south, suggesting that a major attack was imminent, while his real force concentrated to the north near Tel Elisa and midyear Ridge, just as the RAF and the Royal Navy intensified their bombing campaigns on Axis positions, supply dumps, and ports in an attempt to further degrade Rommel's logistics. Montgomery's buildup was finally complete in mid-October, when at 21:40 hours on the night of the 23rd, the still desert night erupted under a thunderous barrage of artillery fire, made up of more than 800 British guns along the 40-mile front. Explosion flashes lit up the sky, while the continuous thunder of deafening gunfire could be heard up to 60 miles away. A prelude to Monty's infantry assault, the near-constant shelling obliterated Axis minefields, gun emplacements, and command posts that left the Germans in a state of shell-shock disarray. After the artillery prelude was over, 4 divisions of the 8th Army's 30 Corps, under the command of Lieutenant General Oliver Leese, advanced across the northern sector near Tel Elisa, along with elements of the 9th Australian, 51st Highland, 2nd New Zealand, and 1st South African divisions. Behind them, engineers with mine detectors and Bangalore torpedoes risked their lives to clear paths through the minefields under heavy enemy fire. In tandem with Lieutenant General Brian Horrock's 13th Corps, who mounted diversionary attacks to the south, progress was slow as dense minefields and stiff German and Italian resistance threatened to stall Monty's advance. By dawn on the 24th, Allied forces had breached parts of the Germans' first line of defense, yet a definitive breakthrough failed to materialize. Returning from his sickbed on October 25th, Rommel was shocked at the scale of the Allies' offensive, replete with overwhelming Allied artillery and air support, quickly grasping Montgomery's battle strategy before skillfully repositioning his limited armor for counterattacks. From October 24th to the 27th, the battle raged on through a landscape of minefields and sand dunes, with progress for the British measured in yards rather than miles. Allied units pressed forward under continuous artillery duels, while Rommel's panzers counterattacked wherever an Allied penetration appeared imminent. Advancing toward midyear Ridge, the New Zealand division suffered heavy casualties, while farther to the north, the Australians captured vital high ground near Tel Elisa, which gave the Allies an extensive observation advantage over Axis movements. Meanwhile, the 8th Army's engineers worked to clear 2 safe tank corridors known as Sun and Moon, yet the process proved excruciatingly slow and deadly. In response, Rommel's defense relied heavily on mobility and precision, focusing his 15th and 21st Panzer divisions from one threatened sector to the next, striking the Allies with anti-tank guns, well-coordinated counterattacks, and 88mm fire that proved deadly against Allied armor. Yet Rommel could not replace his losses, while his fuel reserves fell to dangerously low levels, as RAF fighters and medium bombers decimated Axis supply dumps with relentless accuracy. By October 27th, Montgomery assessed that his initial assault had officially bogged down. Allied casualties were steep, while his armor remained bottled up, yet he refused to be drawn into a battle of attrition, instead pausing to regroup before beginning a decisive thrust under Operation Supercharge, designed to break the deadly standoff by destroying Rommel's armored reserves between Tel el-Akakir and Kidney Ridge, aimed at collapsing Rommel's center. Commencing his offensive on the night of November 1st and 2nd, Montgomery softened up Axis positions with a punishing artillery barrage before the New Zealand Division and the 9th Armored Brigade surged forward against withering fire from German anti-tank positions. The Allies lost some 100 tanks in the first few hours of their offensive, before 10 Corps tanks joined the assault to push through to the Mediterranean by the following morning. Rommel's situation soon went from desperate to dire, as his tanks began to run out of fuel and ammunition. And while Hitler had sent a message ordering him to stand fast without retreat, Rommel knew he had lost the battle, as he faced off with the Allies' remaining 500 serviceable tanks against his own remaining tanks of fewer than 100. On November 2nd, the Desert Air Force flew over 1,400 sorties that hammered Axis columns now in disorderly retreat, while on November 3rd, Montgomery's forces at last shattered the Axis line at Tel el-Akakir and the Mediterranean coast. Phrasing his retreat as a tactical withdrawal to comply with Hitler's directive, Rommel's forces moved westward in disarray. Weary but elated, the 8th Army pursued Axis troops relentlessly, leaving a trail of destroyed or abandoned vehicles in the desert sand, as Rommel's forces retreated toward Fuka and Mersa Matruh. After 12 days of ferocious combat, the Second Battle of El Alamein officially ended on November 4th, 1942, after Axis forces had suffered 30,000 killed, wounded, or captured at a loss of 500 tanks and 1,000 guns. The Italians also suffered devastating losses, with entire divisions either destroyed or taken prisoner, while the Allies lost some 13,500 men and over half their tanks. For Rommel, the Second Battle of El Alamein marked the end of Axis offensive operations in North Africa, while 4 days later, the Allies' landings in French North Africa under Operation Torch placed Rommel between two advancing Allied armies, Montgomery to the east and the newly landed American-British force to the west. The decisive Allied victory at the Second Battle of El Alamein strategically safeguarded Allied supply lines through the Suez Canal while securing Middle Eastern oil fields and maintaining their vital routes to India and the Far East. It also liberated Egypt from the imminent threat of Axis occupation while restoring Allied control over the central Mediterranean. From a psychological standpoint, the victory proved to be an explosive morale boost after the Allies' steady defeats from Dunkirk to Tobruk, from Greece to Singapore, leading Prime Minister Winston Churchill to declare later in the war that before Alamein, we never had a victory. After Alamein, we never had a defeat. For Rommel, the Second Battle of El Alamein marked a turning point from legend to tragedy after his Afrika Corps fought bravely against impossible odds and the logistical realities of desert warfare, which, coupled with Hitler's inflexible orders, doomed Rommel and his corps to failure. The Allies' decisive victory, meanwhile, was won through the integration of air power and logistics, thanks to Montgomery's insistence on vast stockpiles of fuel, ammunition, and spare parts. For the soldiers who fought in the Second Battle of El Alamein, the experience was one of relentless and unforgiving hardship in a merciless desert environment of scorching hot days and freezing nights, made worse by choking sand that infiltrated their food, weapons, and lungs. Infantry advanced through minefields under heavy machine gun fire, while tank crews were burned alive in their vehicles. Engineers worked feverishly to clear mines, while medical personnel worked long days and nights in field hospitals under constant shelling. Letters and diaries from combatants on both sides detail their physical exhaustion and grim determination, leading one New Zealand soldier to describe the nightly Axis bombardment as a continuous roar, the ground trembling like an earthquake, while a German panzer officer wrote that "we are fighting ghosts." The British are everywhere, in the air, on the ground, always fresh, always supplied. The Second Battle of El Alamein proved to be more than just a tactical or operational victory, but rather a global turning point in World War II, marking the first time the Allies had decisively defeated the German army on land. The Second Battle of El Alamein also restored British prestige in the Middle East, while strengthening Allied morale in every theater of war, proving that the integration of infantry, armor, artillery, and air power could achieve overwhelming results when combined with careful preparations and superior logistics. Seen within the global context of 1942, in the same months that Montgomery triumphed in Egypt, the Soviets were encircling the German Sixth Army at Stalingrad, while the Americans were turning the tide in the Pacific at Guadalcanal. In combination, these widespread victories had turned the tide against the Axis powers, for after years of retreat and defensive warfare, the Allies began their long, relentless advance that would eventually end in Berlin and Tokyo, making the Second Battle of El Alamein a turning point moment in the war against Nazi aggression.